Imagine a sound so terrifying that soldiers on the ground would freeze in panic before the first bomb even fell. The scream of the Jericho Trumpet. The Junkers Ju-87, better known as the Stuka, was not just a dive bomber. It was the symbol of the Blitzkrieg and the psychological terror weapon of the Luftwaffe. Designed by Hermann Pohlmann, the Stuka first flew in 1935. It was easily recognizable by its inverted gull wings and fixed, spatted undercarriage. But its most famous feature was the wind-driven siren attached to the landing gear struts, known as the Jericho Trumpet, which produced a high-pitched wailing sound during a dive. This noise was intended to weaken enemy morale and intimidate the population. The heart of the beast was the Junkers Jumo 211, an inverted V12 liquid-cooled engine. In the famous B variant, this power plant produced 1,200 horsepower, giving the machine the strength to carry its heavy, lethal load and pull out of extreme dives. Later versions were upgraded to even more powerful engines, reaching over 1,400 horsepower. The Stuka was designed for precision bombing. While conventional horizontal bombers dropped their loads from high altitudes with low accuracy, the Stuka dived directly at the target at a steep angle, often close to 90 degrees. This allowed the pilot to aim the entire aircraft at the target like a scope. To withstand the immense forces of a dive, the aircraft was built to be incredibly sturdy. It featured automatic dive brakes under the wings to control the speed, keeping it around 600 kilometers per hour, 373 miles per hour. This gave the pilot enough time to aim and release the bomb. The bomb load typically consisted of a single 250 kilogram, 550 pound, or 500 kilogram, 1,100 pound bomb under the fuselage, and 4 smaller 50 kilogram, 110 pound bombs under the wings. The accuracy was phenomenal for the time. A skilled pilot could drop a bomb within a 30-meter, 98-foot radius of the target. One of the most innovative features was the automatic pull-out system. The high G-forces experienced during the pull-out from a dive, often reaching 6 Gs, could cause the pilot to black out due to blood draining from the brain. To prevent crashing, an automatic mechanism would take control and level the aircraft off at a preset altitude, ensuring the safety of the machine even if the pilot was unconscious for a few seconds. The Stuka saw its first combat in the Spanish Civil War, where the German Condor Legion tested its tactics. But it was the invasion of Poland in September 1939 where the world truly learned to fear the Stuka. It acted as flying artillery, clearing the path for the panzer divisions. It destroyed bridges, rail lines, and troop concentrations with deadly efficiency. In the French campaign of 1940, the Stuka continued its reign of terror. It was instrumental in the breakthrough at Sedan and the rapid advance to the English Channel. The psychological impact was so severe that some French commanders reported their troops were unable to fire back due to the paralyzing fear caused by the sirens. However, the Battle of Britain later in 1940 exposed the Stuka's fatal weakness. It was slow, with a top speed of only around 390 kilometers per hour, 242 miles per hour, in level flight, and it was poorly armed for defense, having only 2 forward-firing machine guns and 1 rear gunner for protection. Against modern fighters like the Spitfire and Hurricane, it was a sitting duck. The losses were so high that the Stuka had to be withdrawn from operations over Britain. Despite this, on the Eastern Front, where air superiority was often contested or held by the Germans in the early years, the Stuka found a new lease on life. It proved invaluable in destroying Soviet tanks and fortifications. The Ju-87 went through several variants. The early B models were the classic Blitzkrieg bombers. The later D models had improved armor, a more powerful engine, and greater bomb load. But the most famous evolution was the G variant, the Kanonenvogel, or cannon bird. The G variant was a desperate answer to the hordes of Soviet T-34 and KV-1 tanks. It was stripped of dive brakes and bombs, and instead armed with two 37mm 1.5-inch Flak 18 cannons mounted in pods under the wings. These guns fired tungsten-cored armor-piercing ammunition, capable of penetrating the thin top armor of Soviet tanks. The most famous Stuka pilot, and indeed the most decorated German serviceman of the war, was Hans-Ulrich. He flew a staggering 2,530 combat missions. Rudel was credited with the destruction of 519 tanks, 1 cruiser, 70 landing craft, 800 vehicles, and 9 enemy aircraft. Rudel's most daring feat was the sinking of the Soviet battleship Murat. To destroy this steel leviathan, he flew through a wall of anti-aircraft fire and released a massive 1,000-kilogram, 2,200-pound bomb at point-blank range. He dropped it so low that the explosion nearly blew his own aircraft out of the sky. He was the only recipient of the Knight's Cross with golden oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. His determination was inhuman. Even after his leg was amputated following a severe injury in 1945, Rudel returned to the cockpit. Flying with a prosthetic leg, he destroyed 13 more enemy tanks before the war ended. Rudel's tactics with the cannon bird were incredibly dangerous. He would approach tanks from the rear or side at extremely low altitudes, sometimes just a few meters above the ground, to target the vulnerable engine and fuel tank areas. The recoil of the cannons was so strong that it significantly slowed the aircraft, making it vulnerable to ground fire. Despite the successes of pilots like Rudel, the Stuka's days were numbered. By 1943, the Soviet Air Force had gained strength, and the slow Stuka became easy prey for Yaks and La-5s. The Germans began replacing it with the ground attack versions of the Focke-Wulf 190, which were faster and more durable. However, production of the Stuka continued until 1944 because the Germans lacked a suitable replacement in sufficient numbers. In total, approximately 6,500 Ju-87s were built. The legacy of the Stuka is mixed. It was a terrifyingly effective weapon in the early years of the war, a symbol of German aerial dominance. Its siren, the Jericho Trumpet, remains one of the most iconic sounds of the 20th century, a sound that signaled destruction from above. But it also proved that without air superiority, even the most precise bomber is doomed. The Stuka was a specialized tool for a specific kind of war. When the war changed, the Stuka could not adapt. Yet in the hands of experts like Rudel, it remained a deadly threat until the very last days of the conflict. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of the Stuka, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories of legendary war machines. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend my video about the KV-2, where I show how a single Soviet tank was able to halt an entire German armored division.